The desert wind was cruel, hot like a furnace, and filled with the sting of blowing sand. But on February 19, 1943, General Erwin Rommel wasn't feeling the heat from the sun. He was feeling the fire of an opportunity. Kasserine Pass stood vulnerable, a jagged scar cutting through the Tunisian mountains, and behind it was the green, untested American army. To Rommel, these soldiers were a joke. Their first major battle in North Africa was about to begin, and the so-called Yanks were in his way. He believed they'd fold like paper. After all, he had beaten British veterans across the desert. These Americans? They were nothing more than boys in clean uniforms, or so he thought. But in just a matter of days, Rommel's perception would shift violently, and for good reason. As dawn broke, the Germans launched a thunderous assault. Panzers rolled forward with roaring engines, cutting into the American lines like blades through silk. Machine gun fire echoed off the rocks. U.S. units scrambled, disorganized, unsure how to respond to the blitzkrieg tactics perfected by Rommel in campaigns past. Radios cracked with static. Orders were later lost. It looked like a repeat of the failures Rommel had seen in other Allied forces: hesitation, confusion, panic. And the Americans? Many were falling back fast, abandoning tanks, trucks, even weapons. Rommel watched from his half-track, binoculars in hand, almost amused. This wasn't going to be a battle. It was going to be a lesson. But then something began to change, and it happened faster than expected. On the third day, near the hills of Jebel Hamra, a fresh American division arrived, dug in, and held their ground. Rommel's scouts reported strange new movement. U.S. artillery units repositioned with speed and precision. Radio coordination between armor and infantry was tighter, and air cover began to strike at German columns with sudden ferocity. What Rommel didn't realize yet was that Eisenhower had just pulled the trigger on a rapid reorganization. Veterans from other fronts were brought in. Patton's influence was beginning to seep into the lines. And these American boys? They were learning. Fast. In one sector, a platoon of engineers who'd never seen live combat managed to rig explosives across a canyon pass that German tanks were using for cover. When the lead tank rolled through, boom, the path exploded in fire and debris, cutting off the advance. Rommel's armor was suddenly halted. He frowned. That wasn't in the plan. That wasn't what green troops do. And then came the counterattacks: small, coordinated raids hitting supply lines, ambushes on narrow roads, accurate mortar fire that seemed to land right where it hurt. Rommel's staff began receiving disturbing reports. American forces were adapting in real time. No longer just reacting, they were predicting. Rommel wasn't the kind of general to ignore details. He studied his enemies as deeply as his maps. And what he saw now disturbed him. The Americans were becoming a force. Unlike the British or the French, they didn't rely on tradition. They used mobility, improvisation, overwhelming firepower, and they learned from mistakes faster than expected. The losses were still heavy on the American side, but their spirit wasn't breaking. Instead, it was hardening. Rommel stood on the ridge overlooking Kasserine and said nothing for a long time. The air stank of oil, fire, and gunpowder. Below, the battle raged. But the man once so sure of their weakness now saw something else in them. A question formed in his mind, and it wouldn't leave. What happens when an army that starts this rough gets good? Rommel's binoculars lowered slowly, the same way a gambler lowers his cards when he realizes the man across the table isn't a fool after all. What he saw on the fourth day at Kasserine Pass wasn't just soldiers fighting back, it was an army transforming right in front of him. In the valley below, American tank crews were no longer panicking or retreating. They were firing, repositioning, and re-engaging with a confidence that hadn't been there at the start. Units that had shattered under pressure days earlier were now holding the line with furious resistance. And something else caught Rommel's eye, something that made him reassess everything. American armor, though poorly handled at first, packed a dangerous punch when coordinated properly. When their Shermans moved with infantry support and accurate artillery behind them, German formations began taking damage that couldn't be ignored. The moment that sealed Rommel's shift in thinking came when a U.S. artillery battery near Thala opened fire. Not scattered shots, not inexperienced guesswork, but a thunderous, pinpoint barrage controlled by forward observers who kept calm under machine gun fire. Shells landed directly on German assembly points, forcing armored units to divert or retreat. Rommel knew quality when he saw it, and this was it. He turned to his staff officer and said something unthinkable just days earlier. "They are learning." And every officer in that half-track knew exactly what that meant. An enemy who adapts is deadlier than one who is merely brave. As the battle dragged on, reports began piling up. American logistics moved faster than expected. Artillery coordination tightened. Reinforcements arrived with shocking speed. And fresh leaders stepped into command roles with aggression instead of hesitation. Rommel realized the truth not from the men in front of him, but from the patterns emerging across the battlefield. These weren't the Americans he thought he was facing. The men at Kasserine were becoming something else, a modern army forged under fire. He withdrew not out of victory, but out of caution. His supply lines stretched thin, his fuel dwindling, and Allied air power growing by the hour. But he left with something more valuable than ground knowledge. Back at his headquarters, he wrote reports warning German high command not to underestimate U.S. forces. He described them as inexperienced but frighteningly quick to learn, with an industrial backbone capable of turning losses into lessons faster than Germany could replace its veterans. He predicted that once the Americans gained seasoned leadership and combat experience, they would become the most dangerous army in the war. Rommel's words would soon prove prophetic. Within months, General George S. Patton took command, disciplined the disorganized ranks, and unleashed an American force that fought with speed, aggression, and firepower on a scale no Axis army could match. And many historians believe Kasserine Pass was the day the Green Army became the unstoppable one. The day when a defeat became a transformation. The day Rommel saw not weakness, but potential. And he knew exactly what Germany would face next.